Super Typhoon Bopha, known in the Philippines as Typhoon Pablo, was the strongest tropical cyclone on record to ever affect the southern Filipino island of Mindanao, making landfall as a Category 5 super typhoon with winds of 175 miles per hour, also known as 280 kilometers per hour. Hi, I'm Chris May, host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast from the Weather Network in Canada. After being devastated in December of 2011 by Tropical Storm Washi, Super Typhoon Bopha made landfall on Mindanao late on December 3rd, this day in weather history. Bopha was, in 2012, the 24th tropical storm and was also the fourth and final super typhoon of the 2012 Pacific typhoon season. But this monster storm was unique and memorable for so many other reasons as well. Bopha originated unusually close to the equator. The ingredients for this kind of storm development just do not occur the closer you get to the center of the planet. By Bopha forming here, it became the second most southerly Category 5 super typhoon on December 3rd of 2012, this day in weather history. After first making landfall in Palau, it destroyed houses, disrupted communications, and caused power outages, flooding, while also uprooting trees. Remember that today's episode is available right now on television on the Weather Network in Canada. And if you're elsewhere around the world, then I invite you to log on to our homepage, theweathernetwork.com/weather history. There you can look up today's podcast video short. While you're at it, feel free to check out the others as they're only ever 2 minutes long, so an easy binge. Now back to today's story. After slamming into Davao Oriental and Davao de Oro provinces, Bopha shifted through the southern and central regions of Mindanao, cutting power to 2 provinces and triggering landslides. More than 170,000 people fled to evacuation centers. By the time the system moved to the South China Sea west of the Palawan Island province, eventually dissipating on December 9th, it had left 1,901 people dead and was tagged with a $37 billion price tag in damages. Now, the storm around the world was known as Bopha, but locally in the Philippines, it was named Pablo by their nation's service, Pagasa. Because Pablo was so deadly, so devastating, its name was retired and replaced for the next time the letter P was reached in any one typhoon season within the Philippines, and that name would be Pepito. But it begs the question that we have covered before on this podcast, but it's worth refreshing. Which name is the correct name? The answer? Both are. You see, the Asian Peninsula Naming Convention comes out of Japan and is made up of contributed names for all countries in this jurisdiction. This way, there is a consensus, and it makes it easier when reporting on a storm and when you're looking for aid requests. All internationally recognized names for major weather phenomena are approved by the World Meteorological Organization, which is an agency of the United Nations. The WMO has strategically carved the planet into multiple zones. Countries within that zone get to offer up names from their native tongue. And that's what happens in this zone, and it is monitored out of Japan, as mentioned a moment ago. So that is why you will never see storms that terrorize Asia with names like Adam or Anita. But for the Philippine government, they are adamant that because its yearly barrage of typhoons are traditionally so powerful, deadly, and destructive, the storms must receive names familiar to Filipinos. The reasoning is that if it is to claim Filipino lives, out of respect, there must be a Filipino name for which their lives will be remembered. The nation's central weather agency maintains its own list. So that, in a nutshell, is why when you turned on one television station, you would have heard Bopha, while another may have been calling it by Bopha and Pablo, after it made landfall in the Philippines on December 3rd, 2012, this day in weather history. I designed this podcast, This Day in Weather History, to be as much about the history of the time and the conditions of life in each place and time so that you get the big picture and are able to go almost literally back in time with me when I weave into the history how weather played a role and why it is therefore still remembered today. And you can always be there for every day in the calendar if you remember to click the subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast right now. And while you're there, please consider rating and reviewing the episodes you listen to. This way, we make sure every time you click to the next day's edition, it's your new favorite episode of all time. I mean, that's the hope anyway. Tomorrow is December 4th, and we will be tackling an environmental issue that is literally killing millions of humans each year, along with an unfathomable number of species of this planet, no matter where they creep crawl, or fly. We're talking about smog. There was virtually no sunlight, and visibility was reduced to less than 5 meters in many places. During the winter in many other countries, this would be called a whiteout, but it's caused by intense wind and blowing snow. Or, like back on the December 1st episode, Grey Cup, the Fog Bowl, advection fog sits over an area adjacent to a body of water, blocking out vision. But those can be just as romantic as they are dangerous depending on where you are and the time of their occurrence. Smog, however, is ugly and lethal no matter how you analyze it. And we will analyze it tomorrow on This Day in Weather History with me, your host, Chris May.